Many people in Scotland want to return to the EU 7 years after the Brexit referendum, and for them it is clear. For this, a detachment from Great Britain is necessary. This sounds easy, but it is not. The Scottish independence movement is raging in a debate about the right path to secession from Britain. First Minister Humza Yousaf presented a plan at a special party conference of his Scottish National Party, the SNP. But activists outside the SNP, as well as some internal opponents, have criticized the plan to declare the next British general election a de facto referendum as half-baked, as they put it. Yousaf's idea is, if the SNP wins the majority of Scottish seats in the British Parliament in the vote, which is expected to take place now in autumn 24, this should count as a vote for independence. If the SNP wins this election, then the people have spoken, is what Yousaf said in the city of Dundee, a pro-independence hub. On Sunday, he confirmed on the BBC that he wanted to start negotiations with the British government immediately. And his goal is, either London gives the regional parliament in Edinburgh the right to call a new referendum, or grants Scotland independence directly. But what sounds simple has quite a catch, because both the Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his challenger Keir Starmer from the Labour Party, which is clearly in the lead in the polls, reject secession. And the law is on their side. In December 22, the British Supreme Court ruled that London must agree to a referendum. In a first vote in 2014, a majority of Scots voted for the Union. But that was before Brexit, which in turn is opposed by most people in the northernmost part of Britain. Yousaf is now taking up an idea from his predecessor Nicola Sturgeon, whose confidant he is. The first line on the first page of the SNP election programme should say that a vote for the SNP is a vote for independence, said Yousaf. And Yousaf is encountering headwind in his own camp for this. Without the support of other yes forces, success is impossible. That was complained by Neil Hanvey from the Alba Party. The organization All Under One Banner criticized the plans as vague. Negotiations are not necessary, but the clear statement that a majority in the election actually means detachment. And Sarah Sellius of the Solver movement told the national newspaper, "We have run out of options and times. The SNP hesitates and is therefore losing voters." In fact, the SNP has recently fallen behind Labour in polls for the first time in many years. After the resignation of Sturgeon, the face of the independence campaign, the ruling party, which was considered unbeatable, fell into chaos. First, the members wore themselves out in the debate about Sturgeon's successor, and then a financial affair escalated over allegedly misappropriated donations. And Sturgeon was also temporarily arrested for questioning, but was released without charge. Politically, the independence movement is weakened. In fact, the desire for detachment is quite widespread. On Saturday, around 6,000 people marched to the site of the Battle of Bannockburn, where in 1314 Scottish leader Robert the Bruce crushed the English and won a decisive victory on the road to independence. Polls also show consistent 48% approval, regardless of Sturgeon's resignation, as prominent election researcher John Curtis analyzed for the BBC a few days ago. But that also shows there is no momentum. Yousaf has a lot of work ahead of him. At the base, however, unrest is growing. Former party vice president Jim Fairley asked if the SNP was prepared to engage in civil disobedience and refuse to cooperate with London. "We'll see, but I doubt it," Fairley said. A pro-independence march was planned in the city of Stirling on Saturday, and since Sturgeon's departure, the SNP has lost significant support in many places. And most recently, for the first time in many years, as I said earlier, the Labour Party passed them in a poll. And in addition, a detachment at the end of 22 had moved into the distance, because when the Supreme Court ruled that a second referendum of the kind the SNP is seeking would require central government approval in London, Sturgeon accepted this, because what other choices are there? But Sunak and Starmer will both not grant it. So even if the SNP will be the strongest party in Scotland again in 24. They still have to answer the question, how do they want to make the British government give their consent for a referendum? Doesn't matter if it's Sunak or Starmer. But how do they want to do it? So Fairley asked a very clear question there. And a very fair question, to be fair, because I don't know how they want to do it. And we all need at least one person to answer that, and that is Hamza Yousaf. Because even if they win like that, and the plan we all remember from Nicola Sturgeon, shortly before her surprising resignation, she brought that plan up already. But nobody ever said what happens after this election if the SNP gets a majority. How do they want to convince the government in London to grant the referendum? I don't know how they want to do that. So there are a lot of open questions, and I'm quite curious to see how this will continue. And of course, I will keep you informed about it. But I still have a lot of questions. And if you want to know more about Brexit or other parts of UK politics, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.